This is a study.
Yes, all good.
So, just a few, I guess, kind of what we're gonna do tonight is kind of a crash course in government 101 with a focus on Coma and Cora. I'll try not to make it too long, but at the same time, we're supposed to probably spend a certain amount of time focusing on things. I have some slides I emailed you. I didn't print them off. It's been kind of a hectic day for me. And I have my slides up here. So we'll just kind of use them as what slides really do for me as a slide deck is it reminds me what I was going to talk about and keeps me honest in terms of topics. I'll probably stray a little bit from what's on the slides just because I'm going to cover things that I think are relevant, more than things that aren't as relevant that might be on my slides. We're also, if we can get audience participation from Alan, he's got a wealth of COVID knowledge.
One thing real quick, just so everybody listening or watching online, those slides are available in the agenda packet that's on our website.
Yeah, we know about, we can talk about opening records and throw that in there. And our clerk has been to a training on COLA, so if I say anything that she has questions, she'll ask me. So, when I made this training a while ago, I kind of started not just with COLA and Core, which is what I used to do, but I've added some things over the year that I kind of like. It's kind of things that you should know before you get to local government. And I think a lot of people, even if they've watched some meetings, we all kind of have an idea of local government, but we don't maybe know exactly how to place it all in context. So starting with the beginning, the most obvious part, a city is a special kind of corporation, a municipal corporation in Kansas that's given by the legislature certain powers to do things. I mean, we all know that's kind of obvious, but if you think about it, what we did was we created a special entity called the City of Ellsworth. And we said it has some powers, it can do zoning, it can do streets, it can have a police force, and various things. So it's kind of like a corporation, but it's not like a for-profit business, it's very different because it has different powers and things it can do. And in Kansas, our cities have what they call home rule, which is really important. Because home rule means that not only do cities have these powers, but they have a lot of flexibility in how they set themselves up compared to other entities. If you look at some different, if you want to be like me and kind of nerd out and look at different cities, you can find all sorts of variations on how people do city government. For example, I was trying to think of a for example. For instance, some cities, they also create electricity and sell it to the people that live there. Ellsworth has never done that, and may seem weird to us, but a lot of cities, that's a normal thing the city government does. Ellsworth has a great municipal golf course. I grew up here, taken for granted. A lot of cities, a lot of cities don't have a municipal golf course. That's an option. That's the kind of thing that cities can choose to do golf course for. So, just not going to spend all the time on that, but just kind of so if you're just used to just Ellsworth versus if you've lived a lot of different places, there are a lot of options. So I kind of think city government kind of has we have our statutes, we kind of have our take-home kit, but we can reassemble, we can add on, we can subtract, we can do a lot of cool stuff. Anyway, and that we call that home rule, the ability to change that. The powers of the city are conferred upon the council as a governing body. And so it's important to kind of understand that an individual council member, when we're not in a meeting, can't go out into Douglas and stop traffic and say, I'm a city council member, so you have to stop, move your car. You only have power that you can exercise as a joint group at a meeting by vote. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of that's real important in other organizations where maybe they've had a history of individual council members going into staffing departments and saying, hey, you've got to do things the way I say, you got to open the pool for me right now because I'm a council member. Well, no, it requires the whole governing body working together to make change, to make anything happen. And then in the city of Ellsworth, we have this ordinance that says we have a city administrator, which is really important. Now, if you go, there's a certain size city in Kansas that tends not to have an administrator, but it is kind of one of those options and add-ons. And then there's a certain group of cities that has a manager, which is like an administrator, but different. And I won't get into the difference because it's kind of beyond us, but it's a little interesting.
Well, different.
Yeah.
I've been both.
Yeah.
When I was a manager, like in Houston or Abilene or Texas City, my duties were spelled out by state statute.
Mm-hmm.
I, as city manager, always had the same powers as the city manager Slime and the city manager Wichita. When I'm an administrator, the city decides how I'm gonna be.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Great Bend, they allowed the city administrator to, in essence, be a city manager.
Mhm.
When I was in the Otishe, I was city administrator, but I did not have the power to hire and fire. But as manager, I did have that power. And by Great Bend, the manager does have that power because the city gave it to them. So administrator are local given powers versus a city manager. We're under state statute of city management. And so my powers did not differ. And I know I've been both. And when I've been administrator, I didn't know if I was the manager or not. It doesn't never sit in, it's fine.
Yeah,
So has Ellsworth ever had the city manager?
Ellsworth has the form of government that is normal for citizens of third class. It's a mayor with 5 council members. Poisonton and Russell and Lyons, for example, are citizens of second class. We could be citizens of second class, long story there. They have a default form of government where they have a mayor.
Yep.
And 8 council members selected 2 per ward
Mhm.
over the year, and those are all 2-year terms.
Yeah.
And over the years, the city by charter ordinance, home rule,
Yeah, yeah.
went ahead and changed that to, no, we're gonna, like Hoyson has 2 per ward, but we don't get elected all at once. You 1 year, me 1 year, back and forth. They have 2-year terms. Wellington, same form of government, decided, we don't wanna have 4 wards, we wanna have 3 wards. In fact, we wanna have 3-year terms. COVID decided to have 4-year terms, because they did the home rule power.
Yep.
Then you have cities of the first class, and, you know, I was in a mayor commission form of government. In the city of second class and the city of first class, yet Stockton. Who's smaller than us,
Mhm.
a city of third class has a mayor commission form of government. It's what they chose in the charter ordinance how to do it. And the charter ordinance, we do a charter ordinance like we did with charter ordinance 28 last summer. Charter ordinances are subject to public protest. That we put a charter ordinance in the paper,
Mhm.
like when this city here went to Sunday alcohol sales. They did a charter ordinance, put it in the paper, and the community had 61 days. After the second publication to protest, and if you had a temp,
It's
whatever,
5%, it's usually 5% on
Yeah.
this. If 5% of the voters say, no, I don't like it, then it goes to a full vote, so.
it could be, or if you could should drop it too.
Or you could, yeah, you could, so I think, yeah.
I'm doing a test.
And you know, I find that, so that the purpose I talk about this is, for me, growing up in Ellsworth, my first job as city government was here, I just thought this was like the way city government was. And it's fine if that's what it's not bad if that's what you're used to. But I think it's interesting, to me at least, that there are a whole lot of different ways that a city can kind of grow or change or tweak what it does. I just kind of like to call that out. Yeah, Lyons has the 8, which is a lot. I know some other cities that are, there's always cities that seem to be tweaking what they do. But here in Ellsworth, we've got 5 elected, no wards.
6-5 for the mayor,
And then the mayor is the 6th, right? Yeah, 5 plus a mayor, no wards.
and I've worked for 3. I've worked commissions of, I've worked group of 6, 9. 5, 3, 5, and now 6
Yeah,
now,
there's pros and cons to all.
and they're all good.
I was also saying that, so I talked at the beginning real quick about how the city government only has power to do things in one meeting. So one of the reasons we have that you get into a city administrator is. You have a meeting, you're all here, you make a decision, well, who's gonna carry the decision out between the meeting to meeting, right? So that's the purpose of the administrator is, essentially, city government meets. Decides what courses of actions to take, and then you delegate your city power to the administrator to affect that out. And that's kind of that's the balance, and then he comes back at the next meeting and says, last meeting you guys told me to do X. Hey, this is how it worked out, what do you want me to do next? So that's kind of the back and forth. My opinion, I don't have a different opinion
Board
probably.
of directors, CEO.
Yeah. Mhm.
We're no way different than any other company in the world, board of directors, CEO,
Yeah.
I mean, you know. And as you find out with cities, it's like, you know. I have the power to talk to each one of you. You don't have the power to talk to each other, so start getting the code with that. Because that's what, you know,
I made a note of this when I was going through it from our ordinances. The administrator recommends salaries, but the city council actually approves it. So that's one of the big duties you guys probably have every year, is the meeting where you kind of look at city employee pay and you have to approve it. So the administrator can advocate, can make suggestions, but that power kind of goes back to the city council. Just as a note, just to kind of get you thinking about the kinds of things.
But if you give me a range,
And then I made it also note that we. It says the general practice of the governing body is to issue all orders and directives to all city officers through the city administrator. In other words, I'll just keep picking on golf since I mentioned golf earlier. If you wanted to like change the golf course somehow, you would tell your administrator, hey, this is what we want to see you working on the golf course. You would tell him, we try and we do a report every week, but the idea is that there's a manager in between, a level of government, a level of management between the city council and the department heads directly. So just some stuff. Now let's get into the coma and the court. We're all here. So Kansas Open Meeting Act applies to pretty much all municipal government in the state of Kansas. They call it the Open Meeting Act because of the very first statute literally said, keep the door open during your meetings. It was back from like the 1800s. And the idea is, pretty simple. Whenever we talk about these governing, when we talked about meetings where you guys give direction to the city staff, we have to do that in front of the public. The public has the right to attend and watch the meeting. Now, the public does not have a right in statute to participate in the meeting. But I always say, like, mostly because you guys are elected and city councils are elected, it's usually bad politics to tell the citizens to just sit still and be quiet and not have any participation. So what we do to kind of balance that, what we've done in Ellsworth, is to give an opportunity at the beginning of the meeting for citizens to, residents, to come up here and speak. And we usually try and limit them for time because he could filibuster theoretically and kind of take the whole meeting. And then that's how we cut the balance. There's absolutely nothing stopping a resident from going up, from finding out who their city council members are and calling you or finding you or writing you a letter or whatever they do and say, hey, I'm concerned about this. Can you bring it up at the next meeting? They can do that too. But they can also do it at the open meeting. I've seen some cities deal with open comment differently. But I'm not going to talk about that now because I don't want to start any ideas that I don't think. I think the way we do it is a pretty good balance. Okay. Read my slides, so I'll stay on. Yeah, and so the statute says any gathering or assembly in person. A meeting is any gathering in person or by telephone. And then they changed it to be also or telephone or other meeting. Which basically in 2025, we'll talk about some of that could include social media, text message. I guess if you guys all got really good at CB radio, that would qualify, and then in which city business is discussed and in which majority of the participants are there. So 2 of you can talk to each other. We'll talk about serial meetings in a second. And if all 6 of you get together to watch the football game, the Bearcats are playing basketball and all 6 of you are there, but you don't talk about basketball, that's not a meeting because you're not talking about city business. I think I have a place in here, but I'm gonna say it now. I always warn council though, be aware of public perception, because if there's a standing meeting where all 6 council members get together for lunch every Friday at the diner, and you tell everybody, but we never talk about city business, the public is not probably gonna be believed. So usually what we do here, and I think we do it here, but definitely do other places, is just say if there's a meeting coming up, like a chamber event or something where we know it's likely that a majority of the council might be there for other reasons, we usually announce it just so the public knows, hey, this thing's coming up. We think a lot of the council members are interested and they might show up there.
don't 3 of you go to the mailbox, the post office at 10:04 every morning?
Don't do
If
that.
I see it 4 days in a row, 5 days in a row in the public, seeing 3 of you go to the post office at 10:04, I'm gonna think.
I think too, I'll make this comment now. Ellsworth has a good culture of this. There's some places I work, and I won't name them, but like that need to work on it. But there's a danger in getting to the meeting too early. We did pretty good, partly because we have a 5:30 meeting, so but if you all got here at 4:30 and sat in the chairs for an hour, and I mean, you all have other things in common, but one of the main things you all have in common is city business, so it's probably gonna come up. And the other thing I think we've done a really good job of, we always have to be mindful of, is the parking lot meeting. Because when local governments get out of the meeting and then all of a sudden you go and then 20 minutes later you go look outside and the same 5 are congregating. That's problematic, although, again, it has to be a majority, so I know we've all been guilty of like 1 or 2 of us talking afterwards. I usually stick and talk because I don't see people all the time, I'm not a council member. So anyway, there's some meeting items to be particularly mindful of.
And I have
Yeah.
a quick question for you. In the 2.5 months that I've been a councilman, I noticed that the population of people that come to the meetings varies from time to time. Is there a mechanism or is there anything that says we invite, or is that just common knowledge that the city has? That they know that they can come, or
Other meetings and
I'll talk about notice requirements in a second, so we'll just get to that. I think Ellsworth has been so consistent for so many years that I would hope anyone who's even new people in town would be able to find our meetings if they wanted to. I was talking to someone the other day about YouTube, streaming the meetings. One thing that's important, are we streaming tonight or just recording these?
streaming.
Yeah, I mean, people really like the streaming of the meetings. So sometimes, and this is something to be aware of for myself and everyone else, like, the room might be empty, but in real time, there could be people watching, and there certainly could be people watching, that people will find it too if you do something outrageous, right?
okay,
So,
But they're recorded and then come back later,
yeah,
and that happens a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
so. I think that's when years ago, I remember, I do remember, Charlie, I remember being at a meeting where something fairly controversial happened years ago. And we weren't recording streaming the meetings. And everybody would request from the clerk at the time the recording, because what they did at the time was they had a digital recorder. And they kept it, people knew it was a recorder, right, which we talked about. So everybody, like, the clerk would get just inundated after something controversial, but people wanted to listen to it. Which I always said, I appreciate the people that want the recording to listen to it, because they're actually hearing what actually happened as opposed to the third-hand report at the coffee shop. But that was around the time streaming became popular, and I really encouraged the council when I became city attorney to stream. And I do believe in it because, A, if something of public interest happens at the meeting, I would rather people see directly what happened than third hand. And secondly, generally speaking, we all behave a little bit better if we know we're being recorded. So anyway, not sure what else to say about that. I did have a note, and I forgot to mention it about meetings. Even if you don't take an action at the meeting, even if you're just talking about city business, it's a meeting. So the fact that a majority of the council might, if they got together and were talking about city business, but then said, but we didn't take an action, that doesn't matter. You're not supposed to discuss city business. So,
A pet peeve of mine.
yeah,
Let's just say we have some night that the mayor shows up. And you two show up, and the other 3 of you don't, so we don't have a quorum. Some cities felt, well, we can at least discuss the agenda, I don't know. You cannot talk about nothing until you have a quorum of 3, and the mayor does not count the quorum, so it's 3 of you council members, and you can have that. But I've seen groups already, and I'll walk away, I mean, we had. Like people said, Junction City, we had a joint meeting between school, city and county. And Junction City had 5 commissioners. But by charter ordinance, we had a 4 quorum. Again, we chose to have a 4 quorum for a couple of reasons, because back in the days, 20 years ago, I would have a problem with even 2 you talk after meetings. Because the old rule was a quorum is 3, half a quorum is 1.5. You cannot have more than 1.5 people on. So that means only 1 kid. So Junction City years ago did a charter ordinance to call a quorum 4, half of a quorum was 2, so 2, and there was reasons why, and there's reasons why, like last week, for example, and I have no problem with do 2 here. Commissioner Moon and Commissioner Coos, Jessica, we interviewed for police chief. We can do that because it's, it meets that, but that law has changed a little bit, at least the perception of it.
Yeah.
It used to be happening, well, now it's not.
And Ellsworth has a really good culture of attendance. That's one of our strengths, I think, which I don't take for granted. So we don't have to deal with that form issue a lot. Thankfully, it's important. We usually have everybody here or people trying to. Yep. Next on my notes is about emails, so can an email be a meeting? Yes. The majority of the council regarding city business constitute a meeting, do not email everybody, I think we all know this. When Alan and I send things out, we use the blind carbon copy procedure, which makes it so that people can't reply all. Alan sends his newsletter, weekly, and, blind copies you, and it's just informational, but it's not it's not a discussion, it's just him pushing communication out in one direction. And scheduling, and then there's a question always about, well, how would we schedule a special meeting if we needed to change the schedule of a meeting, how would we schedule it? The ideal thing way would be to go through staff, call the books, so we need one, they would be able to do that. There is a little bit of a carve out for cities that don't have a lot of staff that says if you're just talking about scheduling the meeting, that's probably not a coma violation. We never really want to do that because this is what happens. I call the mayor and say, hey, I want a special meeting. And he's like, what's it about? I'm like, well, it's about the big controversial thing. And he's like, yeah, I'm also interested in the controversy. And then pretty soon we're talking about city business. So we just don't want to do that on the special.
What we would do here is if something comes up, one, I would do the emails that I do now weekly. It says, we have a special meeting. Pick one of these 3 days, let me know, and then I'd communicate back and forth and narrow down, or city clerk would have one staff was. Again, regardless of I'm here or not. Rely on staff to handle that communication out there because. First of all, we probably won't hopefully don't make mistakes, and secondly, it ain't your fault, it's our fault. And put blame on us, and that's what we should be putting on, just like, again. Board of directors. Staff, CEO and staff, and we've got pretty good about that last year, we're happy with that.
Okay, next thing on my agenda is about social media. So this one's one I kind of find interesting. It's in my notes where this happened, but it's a place that's close to here, so I won't name it. But what happened in this place was they had a governing body that only had 3 members, so any 2 would be a quorum. And one of the members, I think it was Facebook, but it could have been any social media, posted about a government topic, which we've all probably done, and a second governing body member commented on it. I don't even know if they were pro, con, indifferent, but they commented on it. Now, this is a sneaky one, and probably, this is one to be aware of if you're on any social media. That's 2 people discussing county business outside of the meeting without public, and the Attorney General said, yeah, that was a meeting violation. So you wouldn't normally get on if you're a Facebooker, and I'm on Facebook too much, well, I need to do less of it. But you may not think, hey, if I see the mayor posted about an upcoming event and I made a comment about it, and we're both in city government, that wouldn't necessarily seem like a coma violation, but it would be under the, so, something to be watched for.
I don't have it here, but I had in the former job where I had 2 governing body members that had so-called official accounts. One called himself Commissioner Gutierrez, and I called him Commissioner Gordon. And so they had their pages, and then the other commissioners talk, and we had the same discussion in my city attorney, with city commissioner in Jeff City. Is when the commissioner would respond on there, and then another commissioner is somewhere in that chain, so is it 3 now, and it's like. 2. And we're not doing it, this is so far.
I really think that is an area where it'd be very easy to accidentally do something. So I just bring it to your attention, just to be mindful of, and be careful. That would be a very easy thing to do. Okay, we had kind of a question that got to notice, well, that wasn't exactly what Councilmember Moon did, but it reminded me. So often I would get the question, especially about a special meeting or some unusual date. Hey, don't we have to publish that notice in the newspaper? We do not have to publish notices of our meetings in the newspaper. What we have to do is notify any member, any human being, any person in the world can go to the clerk and say, doesn't have to be a resident, doesn't have to be, they could be in Timbuktu. And say, hey, clerk, anytime you guys do a meeting, I want notice of it. Okay, and then if we have a special meeting, it's the clerk's job to notify everyone. City of Salina got dinged for this many years ago, and if you ever watch their meetings, one of the special things they do because they're sensitive about it is they start the meeting and their mayor goes, Madam Clerk, did you notify everybody on the list? And she said, I sure did, and then they start the meeting. And the reason they do that is because at some point in their history, they missed that step. And they felt badly about it, so now they just make sure they're very cautious of it, but we don't have to publish, we have to do it. If we're in
But
a
if
hurry.
but if we ever had a situation.
Mhm.
Again, tornado Alan here from
Yeah.
Poison. If we had a tornado, we may have to have a meeting at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
Mhm.
And we decide, or 10 o'clock this morning, if we need to meet at 2 o'clock this afternoon. We'll make efforts, and again, back in Poison Tornado, I didn't have Facebook. Didn't have a lot, we actually stuck. We had employees take flyers and stick them on torn up trees in a tornado area. We made an effort as such, but again, business has to be done, and city business had to be done too that afternoon, because. Trust me, if we ever have some disaster tornado, we're gonna need an ordinance, I don't know what it is yet, or I haven't done. We're gonna have to make some decisions that, I don't know what they are, but we're gonna make it, because you're the governing body, and you gotta keep us going. And again, we're gonna have those situations, not very often,
No.
hopefully. And so,
We don't do a lot of special meetings that I find, I mean. What the AG, people have said, well, don't you have to give 24 hours notice or this much notice, and what the AG, the Attorney General of the Terps has said. No, but you should be reasonable for the situation, so what does that mean? Well, to me. You know, if we had an emergency tornado, certainly everybody would understand that we had to have a meeting the next day. If, I'm just gonna pick something ridiculous, but if we're like, hey, we're gonna meet at midnight on Tuesday, and at that meeting, we're gonna sell the golf course to Patrick Hoffman for $1, you know, okay. And we're gonna give everyone 3 hours notice of this because we're trying, you know, well, clearly, we're not gonna use a special meeting situation to hide something from them. So we wouldn't do that. If we did, everybody would call us names on Facebook and tell us to do that. So we're not gonna do that, but that's, so we give as much notice as we're able to under time, but there might be a time where. There's just a really good reason to do a special meeting, maybe we forgot to do something at the last meeting and it really needs to happen, you know, sometimes that comes up and it's like, gotta do what you gotta, okay. Yeah, that's what I got on that. I wrote down, I'm gonna mention something that just came up to my mind, two things. They're in there. One was on the email about serial meetings that may not be in my notes. In the middle, so a serial meeting is important to talk about, and that's just the idea that, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and order here. We never get Darcy and Dan and Russ together, but Darcy and Dan talk about something, and then Dan goes to Russ and says, hey, this is what Darcy and I talked about. And then Russ goes to Dan and talks about it, and then, well, I'm just going down, yeah. Well, now what we did was, yeah, you weren't all together at the same time, but you did a serial meeting, and that is just as bad, and it's logical because that's usually screwed. So I do say people are like, hey, two of us can talk to each other. Yes, you can, but if you talk to a third one, you are putting yourself in a dicey position because you're not supposed to say what you talked to the first person about. That's, don't put yourself in jeopardy. And then the other thing I was gonna talk about with specials was phone meetings, and Jessica is attending by Zoom or online, or she's gonna watch it later. We can get to a point, you can attend a meeting by phone, we've done that here, so, but I've had some government bodies that it freaks them out, the idea of not being physically here. If you can be here by phone or by internet, it still counts as present, so.
it got a little more cool with COVID.
Yeah.
Before COVID was like, but with COVID, it's become more of a routine.
Yeah, but even in COVID, I remember one special meeting where to get to a quorum, somebody was, you know, it was one of those December meetings where you had to do something that you forgot, and it was like between Christmas and New Year's, and it wasn't good, so, but I was like, hey, we just have to do one thing, and we can get there by phone. Theoretically, we could have all of you on phone, on speakerphone, because we have to publicly listen, and we could let Alan come in here and listen to it. And that would be a public meeting, because he'd have the opportunity to listen to the interaction. I think we probably use Teams or Zoom, something that you do. Cool, all right. Enforcement for Coma, Cora, and general things. The main mechanism is the Attorney General's office for the state of Kansas. Every county attorney also has some authority to enforce Coma and Cora. Anecdotally, they don't usually love to do it. They usually like to prosecute criminals, and they don't want to get involved in local politics, but the statute does say they can. Mainly what the AG can do though, the AG does not, the Attorney General does not have the ability to like change a decision or say, your process was bad, so therefore we're gonna undo the ordinance you passed. They don't have that much power to go and do those remedies. What they can do is say, you need to do training, you need to do a fine. In some in some unique cases, if you had something going on where there's, where the city was getting sued or something, or there was a zoning issue before district court, a coma violation, and you'll see this a lot with controversial things. Usually the fact pattern is, there's a controversial thing going on, someone's very upset about it. The city council knows that everybody's upset about it, and that's when they violate the coma, because they wanna do something, but they don't really wanna be, they wanna just do it quietly so that nobody kicks them in the shins. You know, that's usually what happens with the coma violations a lot of times, is the human urge to just not have people criticize you in public and come to your meeting and yell at you. So what a lot of times there'll be a lawsuit already going on, and then that lawsuit will say, and also, not only did you do something we don't like, but you violated coma while you did it. And it doesn't directly affect it, but it just kind of makes the governing body look like they're really not doing things right. So it's not really directly legally related, but it just kind of makes it bad. I'm not sure what to do with that, but that's an aside. But they really can't, invalidating the action would be extremely rare and almost never would happen. The only way to remove a governing body from office is to do a ouster petition. That's up to the voters. You guys have been hired by the voters, and the only way voters can unhire you is to do a formal petition, which is fairly difficult to do, but occasionally will happen. So even if you do a very terrible job and you violate coma every week and you don't come to meetings, you'll still be a commissioner, you'll still be a councilman. So that's to the voters. Let's transition a little bit and talk about executive sessions, because that's the opposite of an open meeting. So the rule is we do an open. The executive session is when we say, no, there's something going on here that the law says we don't have to be open about. I think, I don't love doing them. As a rule, I would err on the side of doing it open. Because, well, I know you live in as small of a town, but when you live in a small town, everyone's gonna probably figure out what you did anyway. So if you're not willing to look the public in the eye and say, this is why I voted for this, or this is what we did, don't do it. However, there's a couple things that we don't do that, where we can't, and they're usually, the biggest one is an employee situation. No matter what our employee does, or we think they do, or we're concerned about, they have a certain right to privacy. And even if we get, and so it is one thing to have an employee that we think isn't doing the best job, but we have a responsibility not to trash them in public. So, one big exception for executive session is employee privacy, and I've always been a very huge advocate of, if I'm gonna err on, this is my interpretation, my opinion, I'm gonna err on the side of protecting the employee's privacy and going to executive session to discuss about personnel. Sometimes it's not just because we think they did a bad job, even if it's like a mid job. And sometimes I'll go in if someone wants to say a really nice thing, because I have been in the situation where council member A says, Patrick's doing great, and then as part of that conversation, different council member says, he's not that great, you gotta, so. That comes up, right? And so if there's any chance of a different opinion, so I'm being a little bit ridiculous. Councilmember A says, I want to discuss giving a raise. Hey, that sounds good. Why wouldn't we do that in executive session? That's a positive. Well, a different council member may be against that. So we should have that conversation initially in the executive session. If we're going to approve something of spending money, we'll have to come out. But that's where I usually would err on. That's a great example.
The air is gonna vary on that. The one thing to remember is, just as we know, with the point of each of the gentlemen this year, we had an executive for non-elected personnel.
Mhm.
We cannot have an executive session to choose who the next, council member is gonna be. Because that's public knowledge. In other words, so the night when you guys first came and you had to do it in front of God and everybody.
Mhm.
And the council had to discuss it in front of God and everybody. If they had said, you're the best sliced bread they could say, you're the worst thing, So they could, but the point is, council members are elected, so not, so executive sessions for people are only about non-elected personnel.
Yep, come in, so that's kind of my soapbox, but that's just one thing. But I just really, you can tell I was strong about it. There's two other ones that I point out because they come up fairly frequently. One is the acquisition of real property. Like the city might need to buy a piece of land, and we can do that in executive session, because if everybody knows we're gonna try to buy a thing, it's gonna drive the price up. So
And we're gonna have more of those as we had this last year because of our project impact.
Yep, but the actual, so we can discuss it and we can go out and get an agreement, but we have to approve it in a commission, in a public meeting. the process I like to use with the governing body is we do the exact, we kind of get a feel for what the council is interested in terms of acquisition. Staff go to the seller, get an agreement hammered out with them on paper, seller signs it, and then I like to have the signed by the seller version come to you guys. The reason is if you guys approve the agreement, and then I bring it to the seller can say, actually, the price went up. And that puts us all in a bad spot because of the. So I like, if we ever do acquisition, I want the seller to fully commit and say, I will sell you this piece of land for this price and I see.
We're gonna have that happen
Yeah.
next year, as you know.
And then the governing body can say, hey, we can say, hey, take it or leave it, here's the best deal we can do, vote yes or no. So that's just an aside, doesn't have a lot, we'll be doing it here, you're right. And then the last one is consultation with the city attorney for the governing which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship. Now, I've got some notes on that one. I'll skip to my notes on that one, and then I'll come back to how you make the motion. My notes on the attorney-client relationship is, I've talked to a lot of different, gone to conferences, and I've talked to some other attorneys, and some of them will be, one you guys would know, somewhere else I work, is like, you really just, Patrick, you're the attorney. These people will really benefit from our opinion as attorneys because we're attorneys and we just know stuff. And you really need to take them to executive session more often and give them your opinion. I don't like doing that. I think that it's really important that if I say it's a legal matter, it needs to be a really legitimate legal matter. I struggle sometimes with how much information to put in a motion because a lot of times with the legal matter, the more you describe it, the more you violate that attorney-client privilege you're trying to protect in the first place, but for me, it's like, hey, I really see something that is litigation or very easily could become litigation if not handled with. The example I was gonna give, I think these people are far enough away, I'll mention my name. There was a good case in the Attorney General's office from Council Grove, Kansas. Council Grove is, like every city, they have their issues. And they were dealing with a really difficult, controversial annexation issue. And let me see if I can read from here. I don't know if I can do a good job explaining. Here it is. I'm gonna read this. Amazing. Under the guise of attorney-client privilege, the governing body of this city has gone into executive session with this person, this attorney, who's their attorney, to work on the issue no fewer than 11 times since March. It would appear that the sessions have been used specifically, this is the finding by the Attorney General. The sessions were used to avoid all public knowledge of the development of a letter by the city governing body, which was sent out to lessees at the City Lake. So what they're trying to say was what was going on was, as best I can tell, sorry, council, but they had this controversial thing and their solution was we're gonna have our attorney draft a letter. Which makes sense. But the problem was the attorney would kind of write it and then they'd get together in executive session outside the public's view and make decisions about what should go in the letter, what should not, draft the letter. Well, that's a little bit more what they were really doing was making policy about annexation, but they didn't do it in public. They were kind of doing it with their attorney, if that makes sense. So my takeaway on it is it puts a lot of pressure on me as the attorney. I try to be judicious with it, but you have to know if you're going to attorney-client privilege executive session, you need to be willing to, if I ever got called before the attorney general or somebody in court and I had to testify, like, was there a real legal thing? I have to be able to say, yeah, this is a real legal issue. So, and I think there's a temptation sometimes, I've had it other places, I don't think I've had it here. It's like, can't you just find a way to get this into executive session so we can talk about it? And, sometimes, yes, but sometimes there is a real legal angle to it, but you have to be careful. The temptation to just do that is something we really have to be careful. So anyway.
I tend to probably be. I'm more even stringent than Patrick. What bothers me, and you'll see it in a lot of guidelines. I think school board's probably the worst, but they'll say we're going to do executive session for attorney-client privilege. Okay. And again, the past attorneys I've worked with, not they're any better than Patrick is, but I was always taught as at least give a reason why. We're going to have a attorney-client privilege over a nuisance violation or a code violation, we could do that. And I would actually put that out there, at least have it. When I was in Junction City, we'd actually had executive sessions over agreements on some economic development stuff. But our economic development person through the chamber actually had project names, like we'd have Project Fido, okay? We didn't say what Fido was. We all know it's an economic development project, and he gave that, and so, there's a attorney-client privilege. And again, I brought it here, and Patrick has a problem with the way to do it, but, all my executive session motions that I write to you, I actually list the KSA number. And which piece it is. I was trained a little differently, and that's what I do, and I do that because, again, I'm like Patrick, I don't like executive sessions. And when you do it, make sure they're for the right reason. She had a city clerk reach out to Lister one day and Louise had me about it. And the gal says, we have an executive over nuisance thing, I want to call it legal matters. No, legal matters don't count. It has to be attorney-client privilege, and trust me, and make sure the attorney is there. And I'm even so anal, I had a situation in the O'Shea where we had an attorney that was out of town. And I was telling Patrick the stories. I actually said, and our executive sessions. Again, I'm going to tell you, Scott here, the only people allowed by executive session are council members.
Mhm.
You invite the mayor.
Yeah.
You invite me. You invite your city attorney. Well, you probably invite me or the city manager, or you probably need the attorney because you need guidance. But if you don't want him, you don't have to take him. Tell him not to. Likewise, if you want to make a team of a governing body, you include the mayor. It's all the team, but it's still the council's choice. And I've never seen one. I think I have heard of one where the council went without the mayor. And that's stupid because you should be gaining a team approach, not anything else, but you could, because I have to be invited in there. Well, if you go to executive session talking about personnel, you don't have the guys deal with it in there. You don't get much accomplished, do you?
Yeah.
And so that's why you include it, but I am not automatic. And nobody comes in. And when I first got to the other shade, the city clerk went to every executive session. I cringed. And Bobby thought it because I didn't like him. No, her job as city clerk is to document the meeting. You don't take minutes of an executive session.
Yeah.
And just by habit, even though I'd say you can't take notes. She's been taught now, and she'll go to more clerk's trainings to take notes, so she don't need to be in there. And we don't include her,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. One thing, the way I was trained and kind of started here, Elser's culture was that we didn't include all the executive session stuff, and then Alan came and started doing it, and now I do it other places where I work, and he's right, again, I think it's right, and I think it looks great when you cite, I always did I'm gonna tell you the crucial elements, but like citing to the statute of which exception does, it just kind of adds words, but I think it looks cool, so I do that. And it's just make sure like you have your stuff
One
together.
of those good tricks.
Yeah, so I appreciate, always gotta learn, I beat that to death, but yeah, and yeah.
So Pat, you and Alan, you guys gonna keep us safe on that?
You will not have a problem during the meeting, the two of us, and we work extremely well together, of course, as you can see. We will not. If you get a code violation go around, it's our bad.
It's
Ain't gonna happen.
I take it extremely seriously and I do my very best, like I don't like, I stress on them because I do know if things go badly, I can, it's an issue.
Likewise, in the executive session, both of us, and we say executive session is gonna be 10 minutes long, and you're done in 7 minutes, we will probably not let you talk about anything else.
Yeah, some of the stuff we're talking about is good, so I'm gonna it's gonna segue into the motion itself. So I don't think that's all the prepared slides I have, but I think it's more things. So usually, if we expect an executive, Alan and I or staff expect an executive session, we'll probably draft an example for that. You're able to do it on your own, you don't have to do it for us. But what is important and will absolutely get you dinged by the attorney general if someone does it is what you included in. So what you have to include is a statement describing the subjects to be discussed during the executive meeting and the justification, which are two different things according to the attorney general's office. sometimes it's really hard to tell the two different things apart, which is kind of what Alan's saying about the subject. The justification, so for an employee, for employees, we're doing executive sessions as personnel. The justification is to preserve the privacy of the non-elected person. And the subject is, I usually use something like performance of employee. In a city the size of Ellsworth, I don't like going into the department level because we don't have enough departments to
I
review.
wouldn't anywheres.
And again, I would like to, yeah, in an ideal world, like, the AG would be like, you should do, it should be, we're gonna discuss the performance of the city attorney. Well, I mean, now you kind of know who's in the documents, right? So if we did that to our employees, in my opinion, it would be one thing to put it in the subject, but we would lose that privacy we're trying to give the employee in the first place. But anyway, so subject, justification. Who's gonna be in there? Oh, yeah. Who's gonna be in there, which is always the governing body. I think the mayor's part of the governing body, but Alan and I will have to talk about, let's put it up, and then.
I always listen, see, I always, my motions, most I prepare, say mayor, council.
I don't, the council members you can't exclude, so you just, I've never seen anyone try and do this, but if you were like.
It's been,
Oh,
done.
I can't.
And I can't remember,
As we try to like executive session, but Tyler can't be in there. Well, you can't.
So you can't do
Tyler.
that.
He gets to be in there, you know, you can not do it. And then Alan's right, you know, a lot of times the default is often the administrator and or the city attorney. There's a lot of places when I start, they're brand new, the first few, they may not include me, and I don't take it personally because they didn't know me. And then generally, once people know me and they give by, they're like, oh, Hoffman can stick around, you might as well hear this too, but it's, you know.
no, you want Hoffman in there because his purpose is to make sure you are not gonna do anything stupid.
Yeah, I'd like to be in there, but you know, I prefer to be in there, but I try not to make it big. And then some places will leave the clerk in, some won't. I mean, you know, I tend to agree with Alan. You can't ever record, you know, some clerks will actually, not here, long, far away from here. I was working with someone, where the clerk was taking notes, and that's a big, no, don't do that.
And I'm just saying, again, if we ever have a situation where we made an executive session on one of those recent accounts, and I'll pass you documents. I will not let you leave the executive session with a document in your hand. Again, because of the core, a little bit of Records Act, I firmly believe if I take a piece of paper and hand it to Tyler, it is now a public record.
But yeah, I get court.
If I hand it to Tyler, it's now a public record. So when I share things, and again, as you know, from my agendas and everything else, if we add this there, you know. There's nothing worse in the world I hate to do is to change the agenda after it goes out on Friday. The public knows what it is. Now, there's gonna be a time, trust me. I will get a letter on Monday morning from KDOT, and we have to approve agreement by the 15th. And we have a meeting tonight, we don't have a meeting then until the 30th. I'm gonna add the agenda because probably the city's gonna get money. But I keep that to a very minimum. I will do it now and then. God, trust me, I hate to amend agendas. I just, because the public didn't have a chance to react. And I'll even use the example that we had a couple weeks ago, we used to really later with Mr. Moon. I wouldn't let it pass because the public and the other commissioners didn't have a chance to review it ahead of time. And the public didn't have to see it. And again, if it had been handed out, in my mind, if we'd handed out, anybody in the public, not point to the press, because nasty press, but Alan was, I want to see it, and I'd have to go, here it is. And I would have given it to him, because trust me, when I passed out, I've always laid it up here, and I even, as Alan knows, I am stuck before the meeting at times, so, you know. Again,
Anything that public passes to you,
Mhm.
like I have a
Yeah.
picture of a
it's
building,
a public record,
I've got to have a copy.
right, and I have no problem with that.
It's my next subject after we wrap up executive session, just a little bit about course.
Okay.
So yeah, exactly, so subject, justification, who's in the meeting, and then time to come out, because usually ours are like 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. But that's the benefit, gentlemen like Alan or other people from the public, because if you say, we're gonna come back at 7 o'clock. And they go for a walk or go out there and do whatever they do, and they come back here at 7 o'clock and you're like, hey, we got done early, so we just went ahead and wrapped up that meeting, see you next week, like that's violating the code because they didn't have a chance to watch it, so. So that's one reason we didn't air, people was like, how long do you need? it's an art. We try not to go too long because then we'll just have to kill that time. And Alan's also right, each executive session motion needs to be just about that topic. You can't do the thing where you go in for one thing and then be like, hey, well, we're all in here and by ourselves, and we're having fun, let's talk about a bunch of other stuff. That's the rules.
I would come out and we would, if we were, if I make a mistake and says we need a 15 minute executive session and it comes out at 5, we're gonna sit here and look at each other for 10 minutes.
Usually happens the other way around. Oh, yeah, you said something. I had this one pretty recently, which threw me with some people I thought were really. But they wanted to do an executive session for attorney-client, but they wanted it to be, include other people that weren't part of the organization. And I was like, I can't do that because, if we had Alan in our executive session for attorney-client privilege, my client is the city and the city employees could be my client, but people who aren't part of the city, that's not my client. So now we've just broken the whole privilege. It doesn't work. Doesn't happen. Okay, let's move on. And then the last thing I have noted, it's in all caps in my slides. You do not share information you receive in executive session. Do not share, if you hear an executive session and someone says, what'd you talk about in the executive session? The correct answer is, Patrick said, I can't tell you, or I'll be in big, big trouble. That's the only correct answer. I hate it when I do an executive session and I'm somewhere and then the next day I get, hey, I heard this is what you're talking about. No, don't do it, don't do it.
I'm gonna make the argument, it's not illegal, but it's dumb.
I said you'd be in trouble. I didn't say you'd be in jail.
It's not illegal, but it's dumb.
Please don't do.
Again, I had an executive session in Poison, we terminated an employee and Richard Beckman, Patrick knows, told the council that night, keep it quiet, not illegal. But if you say something tomorrow, because we know this is gonna end up in a lawsuit against the city. And if you say anything, you may get the city side court with Alan. And all the commissioner says, no, keep it going on by himself, and they said nothing, and that's the kind of thing. If you have an executive session, you're doing it to have discussion, so it's just plain stupid, because the reason why, it's not, let's just, if you want to spread it right away, just talk about it in front of God and everybody.
Yeah, we can.
And so,
Which is-
again, I would argue it's not illegal, but it's dumb.
Yeah.
And so we don't talk about it, that's why you get, and again, the other thing that I'm getting off a little bit here is there's no such thing in my mind as a small thing. Because even though we violated, we said something, it's a minor thing. It's all about developing good habits. So I treat, if you say, well, we may have broken, but it was nothing. Well, my $1 million, in my mind's nothing too, so why did you break that, So it's just a matter of getting good habits and keeping those, and that's what we try to do, is make sure you get good habits. And bottom line in Open Meetings Act, there's a simple old saying that I have, and Patrick Sherman said it 1,000 times. Public government's best done in front of the public. Just the way it is, and we just do it in front of the public. You're gonna have to make tough decisions at times. You're gonna make decisions somebody's not gonna like you about. You've all had, you have to make decisions that somebody's not gonna like you. You raised the damn water rates, but you made a decision based on it. That's the way life is. If we bring another rate increase to you or something, again, this is another meetings, it's like, well, I'm gonna have to say on that. No, you were elected to represent the public. You gotta represent, you gotta do your job. And I'm very adamant about that, and again, I'm probably more anal than some.
No, it's good. I mean,
That's what 36 years gets you.
But you probably, the reason you are, and the reason I am getting more stickler is because when you've had bad experiences, you don't want to do them again, so you just like. Hey, the last thing on my list is about Open Records Act, which is a governing body member. There's not too much that comes into it. The way it looks a little different from an employee perspective, what an open record I mean. But what I have for you guys, obviously, anything that gets discussed in our agenda packet, it's going to be an open record. The other thing that's probably important to keep in mind is your emails are likely an open record. There's a few exceptions, like maybe something to be that's really truly attorney-client privilege, but probably it's best to assume they're all open record. The thing that I will ask you, beg you, plead with you to do is, especially new people, we do have city addresses, right? Okay. Some cities still don't have an email address, we didn't used to. Do all of your city, if you're emailing somebody that's related to a city matter, please use your city email address. If somebody from your non-city life who has your email, so they send you an email at they said patrick@gmail.com an email about city government. Please take this extra step, forward that to your Patrick Hoffman at Ellsworth City Government and then reply. The reason is, I want, if anyone ever says, if Alan or somebody from the public says, I want to do a core request for all the emails that you've got about the water slide. Okay, I just want to search in our servers that we have at City Hall. I don't want anyone to be like, hey, can I have your, I need to look at your Hotmail account too. So I don't want to look at you guys' personal Hotmail accounts, or, and I don't want to even have a fight about it. I don't want to know what's in there. So just, what you want to be able to do is if they say, hey, I want to look at your Gmail account, you need to be able to say, every email I've ever gotten that's related to city business, I forwarded to my city account, deal with it. Then you're fine. So just do them. And I mean, again, as an attorney, people frequently will say, they'll say, probably shouldn't say this. And then I'll say, you don't have to. Like, let's just stop right here before you say it. And I'd say the same thing about your email, like, if you're like, maybe I shouldn't put this in an email. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Okay, I have a brief thing about conflicts of interest, because people, yes, sure.
If governing body officials, talk about a city business via text, does that text then become an open record?
Yes. Now, the thing, I mean, legally, it's an open record. We are not required to keep open records forever. There's no requirement that says, hey, if you have to keep every open record you ever make. So if somebody requests, hey, Patrick, send me your emails from 2010, I'm gonna be like, I don't got them. It's a great point. Texting would be, the problem is like, so I don't know, I really don't know how long texts live on your phone. Theoretically, they don't live forever, but maybe they do. I don't know the answer to that. What we'd have to do theoretically is do our best, some sort of best effort to regain them, and it would be a huge pain in the bottom. So
There is a code violation that just came out for the city of.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
Yeah.
Was it, I don't wanna say the wrong name, could be wrong. And that's,
Southwest,
I was talking about-
New Dodge City.
yeah, so they were the city governing body was, I think they were doing it during a meeting, they were texting each other during a meeting.
Saw that, yeah.
Yeah, which, on one hand, you're like, it sounds ridiculous, but also,
Yeah.
it sounds like, I think it's the kind of thing a person could inadvertently or less inadvertently do, you know, like you could kind of see why that would happen,
There's
but.
two meetings going on at the same time.
Yeah, well, the Alan, who's here representing the public to report, doesn't get to see that, so,
I had
yeah.
to watch that, John, because before COVID, myself, the city attorney, was sitting over here, the city clerk, finance secretary over there, and then we had the 5 commissioners in between us. When COVID hit, we spread to get this,
Yeah.
closer to 6 foot. And we never did come back to the front, and I had to watch, because I had a few commissioners that would text during the meeting. And of course, our diet was actually a little taller than this even, so they'd go like this, to the text. And Darcy, how you got, sorry, we're go, Darcy, how you got those? And we don't want that crap.
Yeah.
And we don't do that here. The other thing that you guys don't do, and I'm glad not, is don't have a sidebar conversation during the meeting. So you two are gonna, so discussion's going on, and Danny, you turn around to Darcy and go, what do you think about that? And don't do it, and you don't, and I would stop, and we both would. We'd go, don't do that, because again, the public needs. Government is done, that's the front of the public. Just, and you guys have done a good job last year,
We have pretty good
I
culture.
don't think we have a big problem with that here. Real quick, one core issue, real quick, just so you know, because it may come up. We get requests all the time for core. The city, somebody wants information on something. We have one today come in. They want to know about a project the city did a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
And they wanted to know, but they wanted something that we don't have.
Mhm.
They said, we want the bid tab. It was on a project, they want the bid tab. There is none. There ain't no record. They don't get a record.
That's the.
We don't have to make a record. So my career says, how did they make that decision? I don't know how they made the decision. Now, if you ask me for this record and this record, you did those. And you figure what the council did, but a record's only a record if it's a record.
Yeah, we don't have to create, yeah.
We don't create records, we don't make up records. We can't find it. If the guy that wrote it. So the attorney could say Esquire.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's not gonna get it because we can't find it.
Councilmember, I have a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes during meetings, some of us take notes.
Yeah,
Do those become over record?
I have to double check my note thing. Notes in general, I know employee notes and drafts aren't a core record. I don't believe that city council member notes are a public record, open record. The only thing it gives me pause is you're taking it during a meeting, but I know there's a whole thing about notes not being a core record. It's been discussed.
I mean, I got no problem with notes. I just want to know if I need to hold on to them for a while in case somebody.
Well, you're not required to retain, and definitely about open record, about records is like Alan said, like, you don't have to retain them for a minute, so it's like.
I mean, I'm not a member of the governing body, but I wrote, you know, as you know, I still bring a paper agenda, the whole pack. Because it's simpler for me to go to page 92 than look on my computer, so, you know. And I will write notes of mine all the time too, and granted, I'm not, but, you know, but me writing a note, Alan got to hear it. You know, I wrote that, you know, you said, Commissioner Allen said this, I make a note that Councilmember Allen said this. Okay, I wrote it down, it's not right, because he heard the same dang thing. There's nothing secret about your note. Now, you know,
There's kind of mountains of litigation on it, and I think that they're not, the theory why they're not is the way you use a note, like, let's put it on me. I'm gonna draft something, I'm gonna get to a final product, but I have a rough draft and then I have some notes I made before then. Well, I have the right to kind of refine my thought, you know, and so it's like, well, you don't need my first draft or my notes, because I didn't use them, but you do have a right to my final draft that became the thing we actually rely on. So that's kind of the theory. It would be I can look into this more, I will be, and the last thing I was gonna mention, because I have a thing about conflicts of interest, because there's the obvious one, and then in a small town particularly, there's the less obvious one. The obvious one is like, you can't vote if you are a widget maker and the city's buying a widget, and you were like, hey, I think we should buy widgets for me, and, you know, if you profit from something, that's a conflict of interest you wouldn't vote on. And I think everybody kind of gets that. The thing that is also in the same statute that we would forget about is, if you are on a board member, not just a member at large, but a board member at a nonprofit that's on the opposite end of a city business, that's also a conflict of interest legally. Even though you're gonna think, well, I'm a member of Pheasants Forever or whatever, but, you know, I don't profit from it, so I should be able to vote. But actually, you should recuse yourself if you're a board member of a nonprofit that's also doing a deal with the city of some kind, even though you're not gonna benefit financially from it. You're considered, there's a law I think that says you're too close to it. So that got through all my slides. What did we
how
cover?
about, and we don't have it here, thank God, I've had it happen in my career. When a governing body member has the spouse that's an employee. And there's an issue tonight, it's happening in my former city.
Yeah.
They're gonna vote on the fire union contract. One council commissioner is married to a fireman. Can she vote on the contract?
The conflict of interest, she talks about close family members, and so I think,
Yeah,
I think even employees, definitely business members. I have a different place where the volunteer firefighters,
well, these are full time.
yeah, but I'm thinking of one where the firefighters get a run and they vote how much to pay themselves for runs, and I've kind of been like, hey, I think you should recuse yourself from that because of that.
Yeah.
we'll have it. No,
Yeah, you don't do it here. Well, you asked them one night on something, if you're one of
We're
those.
doing the budget.
Yeah, and that was fine.
Here, the way the fire is organized here, it's not a big deal, but there's other places, there's like a full-blown employment, and then there's ones where they kind of go, anyway, I'm critical of that one. But I think the one place I think would see it happening is like, in Ellsworth's a small town, you wouldn't think that because you're a Cub Scout master that you can't vote on it, but I would try that. That's my whole spiel. You can tell Alan and I can geek out about this stuff all night, because we think it's cool, but we guys have not.
I do.
Yeah, I do too. No, you got
No,
any questions?
And you guys have done a good job. I think we find your things, you know. Both Patrick and I will stand up in the meeting, if we see something wrong. Again, when I'm here, I will go away. I went my whole career until last year. In Junction City, where we got an open meeting violation come to us, and I still argue with folks as hell. I still like it. There was an issue on a controversial issue where the city was trying to bring in had been discussion with a person about a business. And the B&A. Well, the correct word is beef harvesting facility, but a solar house. And there's a group against it. One night, the city council went to the executive session for the acquisition of real property. these people, they complained on a couple things, everything they complained on that we were innocent, but the AG's office says. And we were not talking about anything to do with that project, we were talking about buying a building for public works. Okay, and the reason why, and they said we needed to mention that it was public works. My argument is, there was one building in the side, in Junction City, the size big enough for public works department that was for sale. The old Dick Edwards Ford building. Okay, so I felt it didn't need to be included. We got violent, we had to take a training, and we had Jay for the county association come out and do it. And both me and the council member, to this day, we still don't believe we made a violation. And he probably agreed with us, and he basically says, because AG's office said so. But, you know, it was one of those, and those are those fine lines in there, you're gonna have those.
And in my opinion, maybe I'm biased because I'm
Yeah.
kind of on the opposite side, but I think the AG's opinion, they will err on the side of, hey, you need to
Yeah.
do better. And that makes sense when you think about it. And they have a one attorney or two, and they have a couple of attorneys whose whole job is to look at common core violations, and they generally, in my opinion, err on the side of that. Although I had a really interesting one that they said we were okay on, but I'm not gonna tell you about it in public because it's,
So how often do they actually fine cities, Patrick?
fines are pretty darn rare.
The weak Southwest Kansas got a fine.
Because what they look for a fine is, they're like, you knew, you did this intent, you understood that you were trying not to be public and you did it
And
anyway.
I think one of Southwest Kansas was $100 per,
Yeah,
but
but
I have seen very few fines either.
I've seen another one, I can't remember, it was somewhere east, and it was again, like controversial firing maybe or something, and they knew that, again, it's council knows, and you guys have been through controversial stuff, you know it's gonna be a pain, you know it's gonna be a long meeting, you know people are gonna be mad at you about it. There's a natural urge to be like, hey, maybe we keep this quiet enough, maybe if we don't do it publicly, it'll be quieter. And I'm gonna tell you, it will always be worse if you do it that way, just, well, but anyway, enough pontificating for me.
And then tell employees, you might as well tell me because I'm like your mom, I'm gonna find out.
I don't,
You know, and there's something about it. The public's gonna find out. So it's just like, I'm not gonna tell mom because I don't want to get in trouble. Well, that's really,
what,
you're still gonna get in trouble. Mom is still gonna find out.
I don't really, the criminal violations for the G don't scare me, what would scare me, the fact that scares me is, if we have an employee issue, the employee's gonna sue us because they're gonna claim wrongful termination, and on top of that, we violated COMA, if we did, or they're claiming it, because what's gonna happen is that employment lawsuit is gonna end up in front of a federal district judge who doesn't know anything about COMA, but when they hear there's a COMA violation, they're gonna feel like, oh, that sounds really bad. So, and you'll see that not here, but other places where you have employment law issues, they almost always will also say, on top of that, you violated the COMA, you did it wrong, and then that's when I get, and then again, going back to when I was like, I'm very nervous about. Employment stuff, I use the executive session because I'm trying to protect them and I'm trying to be careful with it, but that COVID thing, yeah. Okay. I don't have anything else.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to end special council meeting.
Second.
All right. Councilor Allen has made a motion to adjourn the special council meeting. Councilor Hanson has seconded that. Any debate? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Special council meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Guys.
Thank you.
Have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you.
They got another meeting.